Hello, everyone. My name is Gil Panalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar, where every other Tuesday I invite fascinating people to share their stories so that all of us can become better advocates on creating equitable cities, sustainable and fun, where everyone can live healthier and happier. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, but I've been living in Toronto, Canada for the last 26 years. And I've been fortunate to have worked in over 350 cities. And this webinar is a way of giving back, inviting people from all over the world. Today, wow, we got a very interesting presentation. It's going to be about Bike Bus, moving cities towards joyful, child-friendly streets. And my guest is Sam Balto, who saw the program in Barcelona and thought, why not? I can do it in Portland, where he's a physical education teacher. And he did it, and now he's helping cities all over do it. Sam, thanks for accepting the invitation, and we are all eager to learn from you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This is definitely the largest webinar I've done, so I hope I perform well. I used to be a camp counselor, and at the camp that I worked at, they had this acronym called MADI MAU, which stood for Making a Difference in My Own Way. And I really feel like that is a perfect way of thinking about what we're trying to do with the bike bus movement and creating more child-friendly streets. Um,
Thank you,
I'm
Sam.
Coach
And this
Sam.
is why I do the webinar. I tell people this is not an academic exercise. I don't want you to come every other week just to say, oh, what a fun. No, please, this is not a time for people to be spectators. Let's start on
Yeah.
on whatever people do, whatever they want. It might be about planting trees, or it might be about promoting walkability, or about doing a bike bus in your own school, in your own neighborhood. Okay, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's spot on. And I always like to start with this first photo because, I think a lot of people are here because they've seen me on social media with hundreds of thousands of followers and millions of views. But I started this journey right here at this corner in Roxbury, Massachusetts, where I was a PE teacher. I did my first walking school bus. We had about 8 kids. And as a teacher, having school car line duty and bus duty and crossing guard duty, and then having the experience of doing a walking school bus, I was totally transformed and really seeing the value of this type of initiative. So this is at the when we got to school the first time, this is how many kids we had. And we would do it seasonally for the next year and a half, 2 years. And this was our last walking school bus before I moved back to Portland. And we every time we'd have a route, and then we do it the next season, and then we add another route and see which ones worked. And then finally we had it. So we had 3 different routes coming from different areas of our catchment zone. And there was always this really joyful moment when all the routes converged on the school and we'd meet at the steps and take a wonderful photo. And I just always remember this one student, Quadir, fourth grader. Every morning he'd come off the school bus totally overstimulated out of his mind, rushing to get breakfast, to rush upstairs to start class. And we did a walking school bus and he was able to participate. And at lunch, my gym door was closed because I was eating. And I hear some banging on the door. And Quadir goes, Coach Balto, when's the next walking school bus? And just, knowing that he knew the impact that that had on him has really just galvanized me even more in the value of this. I know you've talked about, the importance of not being on the sidelines. And I think something that's really important is creativity. And this can be actually a lot of fun. And so something we did at the crossing guard duty at my school, this sign kept on getting run over, and one of a friend who worked at a local nonprofit goes, "You should put Tom Brady's face on the sign, and then it won't get hit." We're in Boston, so Tom Brady is a very popular football player for the New England Patriots, and so I did that, posted a photo, shared it with the local news, and it got picked up by UK Daily Mail, Associated Press, and it really brought this immense amount of attention to from the city about the safety concerns around schools in Boston. And the city applied for state safe routes to school funds, and was able to secure just shy of $1 million. So there are like really fun and creative ways to do this. And social media can have a lot of negative impacts, but it can also be this really wonderful tool to share ideas and to call to action. And this is another thing we did, which was the Red Cup Project, where we put red cups out on protected bike lanes that just, or painted bike lanes that didn't have protection, and sort of filled the cups with water. And when they got smashed with cars, you'd have that image. And this was another way to call attention that paint, isn't enough protection. There's this really wonderful cartoon of sort of shows this vicious cycle that families and communities are in. There's too much traffic for Billy to walk to school, so we drive him. And families are stuck, and we're all just trying to do our best. But there's really these simple tools that can really start changing the culture around schools and how kids get to schools. And that's sort of where we come to Bike Bus. The problems we're facing are multifaceted. Children are less physically active, emissions of cars and driving is up. We have a loneliness epidemic and a lack of infrastructure to support active transportation. I just also do want to add, like, as a physical education teacher, the goal is to get kids 60 minutes of physical activity every day. And it doesn't say, it has to be 60 consistent minutes. It's just every couple minutes that you can get of movement adds up to that 60 minutes. So if it's 5-minute walk before school, even 3 minutes, 100 yards, that's 100 yards more physical activity and movement and fresh air than they otherwise would have gotten. A couple years ago, I saw this video of a BC bus in Barcelona. And I remember it's like a 15-second video. I maybe watched 5 seconds of it on Twitter, and I just sort of closed my phone. I was like, I got to do this. And I had experience doing walking school buses, but just seeing the joy of the kids riding bikes, the music, sort of like the scale of the kids taking up space just really inspired myself and a lot of other people to start bike buses. What is a bike bus? A bike bus is an organized group ride on a designated route with meeting times. It has adults or parents or neighbors who come out to support, to help with crossings and just ensure safety. And I think one of the great things about the bike bus is that it creates safety in numbers. The demand, there is this immense latent demand for physical activity, for connection, for community. And the way our built environment is not conducive for that. And, I'm going to tell some more stories of, these communities that the parent just throws out this idea of starting a bike bus, and this whole wave of the community shows up because there's just so much desire for joy and physical activity. And there's this notion that I hear a lot that kids just want to be on, the couch playing video games. And I think that could be nothing farther from the truth. Kids want to be outside and with their friends, but the built environment that we've created around them is not conducive for that. And that's not an issue on the parents. Parents are trying to do their best, but it's this vicious cycle that has created this. And the bike bus is a really big call to action that we need to change how we are doing things. Bike bus as a solution promotes joy. It's a climate solution. It's all ages communities. There's wonderful stories of seniors who are participating in the bike bus, seniors who look forward to coming out and cheering kids on as they pass. And it's this amazing tool for helping to implement better infrastructure. So I did my first bike bus for Earth Day in the spring of 2022, and they say the rest is history. I would post my videos online. A parent actually posted a video of our bike bus maybe a couple months after starting it. And I remember doing the dishes the night after our bike bus, and the video had like 200,000 views that this mom posted on TikTok. And I was like, that is a lot of views for our bike bus. And I remember going to bed and then waking up the next morning and getting ready. And my wife's downstairs doing breakfast with the kids. And I checked my phone, and the video now has 2 million views. And I'm upstairs going, holy shit, holy shit. And my wife's like, Sam, what's wrong? I'm like, that video has 2 million views. And I remember that day during PE while I'm teaching, I get emails from the Washington Post, Access Hollywood, NBC Nightly News, and all these other news stations that saw the video and wanted to tell the story of our bike bus in Portland. And the following Wednesday, we were on NBC Nightly News on national news. And that was always really cool. I love this story of my son. We're like, he's maybe 3 at the time, and we're watching it. And I'm on the national news. And as soon as it is over, he goes, Dad, can I get milk now? And I think that's always this wonderful reminder, like, I'm still dad. This is still about the children. And, us adults need to come back down to their level. And, you can enjoy the recognition, but there's still lots of work to do. So a year and a half ago, myself and a group of other bike bus leaders, we started a nonprofit called Bike Bus World. And it's basically just a global hype group to support bike buses. We have a map where we track the growth of the bike bus movement. We have over 220 entries. There's over 411 routes. I think the last time I checked, there's 27 countries, and I just got a message from South Africa that they're wanting to start one. But it really is this global movement that's growing exponentially. And I think something I kind of had this realization that I shared online recently was every school year, at the start of the school year specifically, a bunch of parents will come up to, myself and other bike bus leaders and will say, my kid learned how to ride the bike this summer so that they could participate in the bike bus. And you sort of think about that, every year, every bike bus, like 5 to 10 kids are learning to ride their bike so that they can participate that. And then if you expand that on all of these projects, all these bike buses that are happening around the world annually, as the amount of bike buses are increasing annually, that is a ton of growth and a ton of movement of getting kids and reversing this trend of kids not riding bikes and not learning how to ride a bike. And it's just starting by these individual communities making an action of inviting people to ride bikes together. This past year in Worcester, we had our 3rd Global Bike Bus Summit. It was by far the largest we had. Next year, it's going to be in Lisbon, Portugal, and the year after that, it'll be in Portland, Oregon. And so it's just this amazing opportunity for families to come together, for the children to come together. My son was able to join, and when we left our trip, we wake up the morning before our flight, he goes, Dad, I have so many friends from around the world now. And I think that's really what, this is about. I feel like my son really has these like amazing moments that just kind of bring me back down to reality and remind me what we're doing here. And it's about making these connections and creating these social opportunities for our kids to dream bigger, to be creative, to take risks. And we're constantly doing that. There's also been research that's been happening that's been tremendously beneficial in Portland at Portland State University. In Barcelona, they had a wonderful research. In Glasgow, they had this very fascinating research where they interviewed drivers as the bike bus passed by. So the bike bus goes by, they hand out this little flyer questionnaire to drivers. And what they found is that drivers might have been, inconvenienced, 20, 40 seconds as the bike bus passes, but they really understood why it was happening and why it was necessary. And I think it really is this tool that Bike Bus sort of reminds people about what's important, about the need for better infrastructure, about the need to pay attention to children, that, they're not just wanting to be on the couch playing video games, but really it is our job as a society to, make sure that these kids have their freedom. And while we wait for our leaders to wake up to that, the bike bus is going to keep rolling, and we're going to keep claiming the space that we absolutely deserve. I love this photo. This is probably one of the coolest success stories of the bike bus movement. It happened actually really early with the Shaolin's bike bus. On this kid's handlebar is a button. And this button is the button that every human being would want. It's a button that gives the light cycle an extra time so that this bike bus would be able to make it through in one cycle. So what was happening is the bike bus was so big and the light time didn't give them enough time to get through. They'd have to split up, which made it a more unsafe environment. And so the city of Glasgow worked to create this button that when they push it, the next light cycle would be twice as long, which gave them enough time to make it through. And so this is always this really cool, there's these very simple ways to scaffold and support bike buses. And it doesn't always have to be a full, citywide protected bike lane network. I mean, that would be ideal, but it can start with these incremental steps. And this push button is a perfect example of that. This is an article from the bike bus about the button. And the impacts on community is tremendous. This is a bike bus I did at a high school, Dunbar High School in Washington, D.C. I'm actually wearing their sweatshirt. And it was incredible being able to be in an urban setting, high school kids, Black and brown students, riding bikes to school. The PE teacher, Coach Clark, used it as a way to improve attendance and address absenteeism issues, and also just finding creative ways to build more community at his school. I definitely suggest going back and watching this video. The sound doesn't work, but it's this mom. She just posted this like a month ago. She lives in Florida. She saw a bike bus video and she's like, I'm going to start a bike bus at my kids' schools. And she made a Facebook group. And what she's basically saying is within the first 4 hours of opening this Facebook group saying that we're going to start a bike bus on Friday, over 40 people joined the Facebook group to participate and to, get more information about it. I think this is this amazing example of like Florida, we sort of write it off as this very car dependent community, but there's pockets where you can do a bike bus, where you can create these opportunities, and communities are figuring that out and bringing problem solvers to be able to do it. And I think we forget that like we are very resilient. We can come together when we raise our hand and ask for help. People want to join and help. And also, if you're throwing something fun out, like a bike bus, people always love joy. Remember, the alternative are these soul-crushing school car lines. And so if you compare a kid, a parent taking their kid in a school car line versus the joy of a bike bus, they're going to choose the bike bus. Another thing that's just been really amazing to see is that over the years of bike bus leaders, the people who start bike buses now become these really meaningful advocates in their community. So Catherine in Glasgow was awarded Cycling Champion of the Year in Scotland. I believe it's called Women on Wheels is the nonprofit that she works for now. And it's just amazing to see how, people who have maybe always had this feeling about, the state of our transportation, when they experience the bike bus and they start organizing one and seeing the needs, they really become these lifelong advocates and champions for active transportation. This is an example of an infrastructure improvement that happened on our specific bike bus in Portland. This is a modal filter that was put in, and the pushback for these 12 flex posts for a pilot was immense. But thankfully, our bike bus went through this area, and the city ended up pushing through all the pushback and did the pilot, and now it has become permanent. And this modal filter is a game changer. As someone who's hyper focused about the safety of the children in the community, it is night and day difference. This is another really cool example of testing out an idea and it becoming permanent. This is the Atlanta bike bus. Really exciting to see what's happening in Atlanta. Again, you think of a place that's very car dependent is really making great strides and growing with their local bike bus movement. And so they did a pilot of a protected bike lane in front of the school, and I found out that it is going to be becoming permanent. So it's just really incredible to see that our leaders are paying attention. And I think that is one of the things that However you approach the bike bus and the bike bus movement is, there are ways to support. And writing emails to your leaders saying like, why isn't there a bike bus? Why don't we have better infrastructure so that we can have one? Because you do have to have a par-based infrastructure. Or, if the city is proposing putting in a protected bike lane or a modal filter, and you're like, oh, there's no kids, biking, so who needs it? Or there's nobody biking. Just remember, like, all of these communities that didn't have all these people biking, and then somebody just said, hey, let's start a bike bus, and then everybody showed up. Like, I know I'm very good at my job, but I'm just a dad, and there's all these other dads and all these moms who just say, hey, let's try this, and then the community shows up. The sound doesn't work, but this is again a video of the Dunbar bike bus. This is Jeanette Sadiq-Khan of Bloomberg, and she's just talking about the bike bus movement being very strong and the impact that it's having on the national and global scale. And it's just really been amazing that leaders, state, national, international leaders are paying attention to what's happening with the bike bus movement. Leading with joy is always so important. And one of the best quotes is, bike bus is a vast ocean of joy. And the smiles on kids' faces, and how it, really reminds us that prioritizing children and their wellness is so critical. And it actually helps our, wellness and benefits us greatly too as adults. And so bike bus is just filling the streets with joy. If you ever need a boost, go to Bike Bus World on Instagram. It is the most joyful place on the internet. That is one of the most common comments we always get is, why am I crying? This is so, beautiful. I didn't think I was going to get emotional at 8 a.m. in the morning. But, it really is this thing that just brings you back down and reminds you what's important, that there is good in the world, and it's being led with children. So I'd say, the biggest call to action is starting bike buses at your school, in your community, sharing it. The power of sharing these videos, commenting, liking, reposting really does make a difference. So many people, especially with the bike bus, are inspired just visually by it, that the more we can share it and talk about it, the more people are going to see it. And there's still millions of people, there's tons of communities have no idea what a bike bus is. And so I think it's really important to, share, start them where you can. And again, like, you don't have to do it every single day. Hardly any bike buses do it daily. A lot do it weekly, monthly, even seasonally, fall, winter, spring, or just start, in the warmer weather times and watch as you do it consistently. I always say consistency is the magic sauce. So doing it consistently. I mean, funding programs, there's why am I going blank on it? Sustrans has a really wonderful bike bus program with support, where they support bike buses that are happening in the UK. And we're seeing more and more municipalities understanding that volunteerism is inequitable and unsustainable, that we have to do more to remove the barriers so that more communities can do that, whether that's bike education, making sure kids have access to bikes, secure bike parking, infrastructure, or supporting leaders so that they can lead bike buses and walking school buses as well. Absolutely check out bikebusworld.org. It's a plethora of resources. Gil, I think you've inspired me to also do some sort of, maybe I won't start every other week, but maybe we'll start with monthly webinar series where bike bus leaders get to tell their story and what they, what sort of makes their bike bus special. And just always remember, children are 20% of the population, but 100% of the future. And our kids are paying attention. And one thing I always say to our leaders is, kids don't want perfection, they want to be seen. And so even simple things like the push button, or adding those 12 flex posts, or other types of infrastructure improvements, or joining rides, but mostly infrastructure, is a really wonderful way to show kids that they have agency, that they have the ability to create change, and that only helps them become more active citizens as they get older. Again, one more story about my son. So there's the bike bus at the school that I teach at, and then there's the bike bus to my son's school that I started 2 years ago. He was in kindergarten, and towards the end of the school year, we're biking to the start of the bike bus, and my son turns to me and goes, "Dad, who's the boss of the bike bus?" I go, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Who told you to start a bike bus at my school?" And I go, "Oh, that's a really good question, buddy. Nobody told me to start a bike bus at your school. I just thought it'd be something positive for you and your friends and the school community." And he goes, I love the bike bus. Thank you for starting it." And it's always this reminder, there's no boss of the bike bus. You do not need permission from anyone to start one. You don't need a permission from the principal, from your city, anybody. You don't need permission to organize your community. You just put the idea out there, find other people that want to show up with you, and do it consistently and be as inclusive as possible, and it will grow. This is a bike bus I did in Portland, Texas, another one, absolutely beautiful community. And finally, I didn't mention it until the very end. This past January, Justin Timberlake joined our bike bus. I made a video calling him out, and while he was in concert in Portland, he actually rode with us. And it was incredible to, have him experience the joy of the bike bus and to be able to talk about it with at his concert and since. So here is my contact information. Please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always open and willing to talk. There's resources on our website, bikebusworld.org, and I'm excited for the Q&A. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Wonderful. It's so obvious. I'm so grateful. I mean, it's obvious that bike bus is good for physical health, but you have shown us how it's also good for social health, for mental health, for sense of belonging, for community building. Any last call to action? You have people here from all around the world, and I invite you and everyone. Remember, in 2 weeks from today, we're going to have part of San Francisco. But any call to action to the people that are here thinking about bike buses in their own neighborhoods?
Yeah, I'd say John Zimmerman, who's in this chat, he once said something to me. There's the hardware and the software. There's the physical infrastructure that we need, but then there's the software, that's the social infrastructure. And those types of programs like the bike bus do need love and care. And I think we have hit this state, and it's hard for us to, sort of talk about because it can be, upsetting, but our social fabric is much more torn than we might believe. And we used to have this idea of if you build it, they will come. If we build this nice protected bike lane, people will just flood it. And I think we're learning that that's not necessarily the case, that our communities do need this attention and support. And that when you do help create these social programs, it helps support the physical infrastructure. And it's this very symbiotic relationship that our leaders have these climate goals and these mode shift goals, but they also have to pay attention and support the social infrastructure, these movements that are helping support their goals as well. And so, yeah, that's it.
Sam, thank you. What a wonderful presentation. It was very clear through all of your images and your words that Bike Bus is about fun, about children's happiness, but also about improving their physical health and mental and social, but also a sense of belonging and about community engagement. What a wonderful program. I hope that everybody who watches this video will think about doing it in your own school, in your community, and please share it with decision makers, elected officials, city staff, advocates, media. Thank you very much.